two speakers, Matthew Cohen and Jose Uruchaga. Matthew Cohen is the founder of Off the Grid. You might have been there before. It's like a night market with food, and he sets up these mobile markets all over the Bay Area. And Jose is the founder of Hitmap, and Hitmap is an online marketplace that helps retailers find and select other retail locations. They work together a lot, so we'll hear a bit of how they relate. So if we can welcome them to class, please.
Hi there. My name's Matt. I guess, show of hands, have you all heard of Off the Grid? Yeah? So it's new to some people. I started Off the Grid 6 years ago in 2010, 6.5 years ago. I did it after I was an educator, and I never ever thought that I would be doing this business. Are you all considering entrepreneurship? Yeah, to some extent. I think my story is a lot about kind of adapting and changing over time. One thing that's really amazing about the Bay Area is it kind of distills this environment where you have to adapt, you have to grow, you have to change in order to be successful, really. And so I hope you can sort of take away some kind of kernels of wisdom. So my story actually starts in Japan. And my experience in Japan was really one where I was really engaged by these amazing Asian night market experiences. That is kind of what Off the Grid is trying to distill, is this kind of sense of energy and this sense of place. I lived in southern Japan. Show of hands, has anybody been to Japan? No? You should go. There's an entire room here of people who haven't been to Japan. Oh, you need to go. I arrived in Japan. I was a teacher in Atlanta, and I arrived in Japan. I didn't speak a word of English, or a word of Japanese. I spoke some English. I didn't know anything about the culture, really, but I lived there for 3 years. I had this amazing experience being there. But one of the first things that happened when I arrived off the plane was I ended up in this small town in southern Japan, and there was this truck that was kind of calling into the distance. Has anybody heard the word yakitori? Yakitori? So yaki in Japanese means grilled, and tori means chicken. And so in the summer in Japan, there are these small trucks that go around serving yaki imo, and that's barbecued sweet potatoes. And they have this call that they kind of sound into the distance. It's really kind of interesting. It's yaki imo! So I'm like, the first night I arrive in Japan, I'm kind of bleary-eyed, and I'm like totally out of sorts. I have no idea where I am, and I hear this like haunting sound at like 1 o'clock in the morning in the kind of rural Japan is yakimo, and I was like, I have no idea what I've done. But it turned out, it took me 6 months, but I figured out what it was. It'll come back in the story later on, but there are these little cars that kind of drive around serving barbecued sweet potatoes. So I came back to the United States, and I was like, okay, it's time to have a real job. And I went to work at a hotel, the W Hotel. I worked at a couple of them, but I was like, okay, I'm going to do something serious, right? And so I did that for 2 years, and I'm kind of have this kind of personality where like I'm pretty competitive. And so I sat in the bowels of hotels for 2 years, basically kind of trying to check the box of like, I'm gonna rise in this organization. And what actually ended up happening was I got very pale, and I had this kind of realization that I was working for somebody else, and I was working for somebody else's success. And if I was gonna be working investment banker hours, I should probably be getting paid investment banker pay. And so I was like getting pretty burnt out. I internalized this idea from Japan. I don't know if anybody's ever studied judo. This concept also exists in karate, but it is this idea of ippon. and ippon means, if I can kind of distill it to one idea, it means a perfect action that happens one time. So somebody comes at you and you are able to deflect and parry something and continuously kind of perfectly respond. And it's something that you practice over and over and over to do so that in the moment you can respond in a kind of perfect sort of union with what's going on. So I kind of internalized this kind of sense of work ethic around what I was doing, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna really make a change. I'm gonna move away from the hotel business. What am I gonna do? So I had been out all night. I had taken a promotion from San Francisco to Silicon Valley. I was working in this other hotel. So I had moved to San Francisco to be in this great city. I was no longer living in San Francisco. I was living in East Palo Alto. I was working crazy hours, and I was just like basically burnt out. So I had been working nonstop, like 80 hours one week, and I got called in. There's a position in hotels called the night audit. It's basically to close the books and get ready for the next day. So the manager who was managing night audit at my hotel called out sick, and so I had to go in at like basically 5 o'clock in the morning after going out really hard the night before. And so I get this call at like basically 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in my shower and I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of still a little bit tipsy, and I fall and I cut my toe, and so now I'm bleeding, and I have to go in and do wake-up calls at this hotel in Newark, California. And I was just like, this is the worst, I'm done. So I went in and I did I swear there's a point to this. I went in and I did the wake-up calls, and then I don't know if anybody's ever needed one stitch at a hospital, but you are like the lowest priority in their world, right? So I went to the hospital after doing these wake-up calls, and I basically sat there for like 3 hours. And I read through every single magazine that was kind of in this ER waiting room, and the magazine, one of the magazines I came across mentioned this food truck. So this is in 2006, 2007. It was called Heart's Challenger. It's still around. It was a band that was driving around Sunset Strip in Los Angeles, and they were using it more as a promotional vehicle than like a serious food truck, but they were selling like high-end ice cream and Japanese trinkets out of it. And I was like, wow, like that idea is really amazing to like take a food truck, an ice cream truck that was typically marketed toward children, and market to adults in a kind of high-end sort of way. This was, you know, the world has kind of changed around street food, and people, you know, especially Americans' perceptions of street food lately, but that was really different at the time. And so I was like, well, what can I do that kind of connects to my previous experiences? And I thought back to this idea of yakiimo and like my other Japanese experiences, and I was like, I know what I can do. The place that I was in was famous for, that I lived in Japan, was famous for ramen. And I had gotten really into it during my time in Japan. And I was like, I'm gonna open a ramen food truck. And I was like, I got inspired by it. I made a business plan. I talked to 3 of my closest friends. 2 of us quit our jobs, and we were like, we're gonna open a ramen truck. The only thing that people don't really understand about food trucks is that the easiest thing to do a lot of times is to buy the food truck. The hardest thing to do is to actually find a valuable, viable place to park it and be able to make a business out of it. And so my idea at the time was, I'm just going to drive around at night and sell ramen to drunk people. And so I went down to the city, and at the time there were no city regulations that were listed on the websites. There was one person in the police department that was responsible for mobile food vending. His name was Officer Stewart. At the time, he was out on disability leave 3 weeks out of every month. And he was the only person who, nothing was written down, and there was one form, one-page form that you would submit your application, and it cost $10,000 to submit your permit application. You would put 5 locations on that form, and if none of them were approved, he would keep your 10,000 bucks. So I basically was like, oh, well, what do you do? Well, I stalked him. So I would start my week every week at the police department, and I knew if he showed up on Monday, he was going to be in town, or he was going to be in the office that week. And so I would go into the office every single day and basically just like milk him for information until he got tired and threw me out. And then I would basically know, okay, next week he's probably not going to come, and I'd spend 3 weeks working on other things associated with my business. But at the time, I became one of very few people in the city, well, probably one of like 3 people in the entire city of San Francisco that actually understood how mobile permitting worked. And that'll come back around at a different time. This is me serving ramen a while ago, but this is 2000, 2007, 2008. Also at the same time that this was all going on, the financial crisis of 2008 happened. And the interesting thing that happened at that time is, number one, all these people got lost their jobs. They were in construction, they were in IT, they were in all different sorts of things. They were wanting, there was like this really interesting thing that happened where people were really wanting to pursue something they were more passionate about than the kind of work-a-day kind of salary jobs that they've been doing in the past. And for whatever reason, food has this really deep connection to people. We can go into long conversations over many beers about why that is. But they wanted to pursue food as an option, and there were no jobs really, or they were kind of waiting to see what happened with the economy. And so they went out into the streets and they went out into parks, and they basically started selling food and putting up a little shingle. And it was all totally illegal, and they were using Twitter to communicate where they were, because the tricky thing about street food has always been the unpredictability of it, right? If it's raining out, is the food truck going to arrive? I only have 30 minutes for lunch. How do I know I'm not going to waste my time walking 15 minutes to know that the food truck isn't going to be there because they decided to take the day off, right? Social media kind of created that environment where there was the ability to have a relationship with an actual food business that was mobile. And at the same time, these people were like, okay, I'm pursuing all these different things. This is a buddy of mine, his name's Curtis. He used to run a business called the Creme Brulee Cart. All these people were basically out in the world, and it was 2008 for me. And I was like, man, like the financial crisis, maybe not the best time to sink every dollar I've ever saved in the world into a food truck business while literally people are losing their jobs left and right. And I was like, well, there's all these people that are out kind of doing their thing. Like maybe people would be interested in learning some information about how to actually do this food permitting thing that I had learned and spent a year kind of trying to figure out. At the same time, again, this is the serendipity of entrepreneurship and the luck that inherently comes with running any business. My girlfriend was out of town. I went to Magnolia Brewery in San Francisco. I was sitting at the bar, just sort of chatting with people at the bar. A woman sits down at the bar next to me. She's waiting for a friend to arrive, and I'm like, hey, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'm in the food business. And I was like, oh, that's great. I'm in the food business too. She's like, oh yeah, what do you do? And I'm like, it's a little bit strange, but I help people launch food business or mobile food businesses. I'm a food truck consultant. And she goes, that's crazy. Me and my best friend announced today that we're going to run we're going to do the first San Francisco Street Food Festival. The guy who was the executive director, her friend, of La Cocina, which started the San Francisco Street Food Festival. The crazy thing about this timing was, I was like, wow, we should hang out, and I'd love to meet your friend. I ended up managing all the volunteers for the San Francisco Street Food Festival the first year. And the even crazier thing about it was, so La Cocina, which is the organization that's responsible for programming and throwing the San Francisco Street Food Festival, is really aimed at helping immigrant entrepreneurial women. And so a lot of the people that were interested in starting businesses at that time didn't fall into that category, but they had volunteered for the Street Food Festival because they wanted to kind of learn through osmosis through all of these restaurateurs that were participating in the event. And I ended up meeting and organizing basically all of them during that event, and basically they comprised the initial group of people that were my clients as a consultant, helping them to open their food trucks. So trucks like the Chairman, trucks like Hurry Up Now, trucks like Koja, all of those different things kind of came out of this period of time. Like I said, the interesting thing about mobile food trucks is that it's easy to buy a truck. It's very hard to find a place to park it. And so all these people, at first they were like, help us to find locations to be able to park. But then they were like, we want to be able to group together. And I thought back to my time in Japan, and I was like, well, there was these things called hanabi, Japanese fireworks festivals. They were kind of transient. It would travel all over to different cities all over Japan, and they actually published maps where they post the amount of rockets at each of the fireworks festivals in each town, and they compete over the amount of rockets at their actual events. They're really great, and I thought, well, maybe I could do something that's kind of like that. And so I searched, actually, again, for another year, because at the time, mobile permitting was oriented so that basically hot dog carts couldn't be within 300 feet of other hot dog carts, because that was the only mobile food, that was what they considered, basically they built the laws around hot dog vending and pretzel vending. And so I found this piece of property in northern San Francisco, at Fort Mason Center. It's federal property, so it was exempt from San Francisco city permitting. So those laws keeping the trucks away from each other didn't really pertain to it. And this was the first event. I sent out an email to 2 food journalists and to everyone that I knew, and I had no idea what would happen, and 500 people showed up the first week. Then the second week, I didn't really know what was going to happen. I didn't really know how to really continue going. 1,000 people showed up. And then the next week, 1,500 people showed up. And pretty soon, it looked like that. Right now, we see between 6,000 and 8,000 people every Friday at Fort Mason Center. But it was like that first kind of 6 months of doing it. I wish you all the opportunity as an entrepreneur to experience catching a wave. Because sometimes you'll try and start a business and it's just like you work and you work and you work, and it's just like pouring water into a bottomless well. But other times there's opportunity that presents itself. And really the kind of hallmark or the ability to catch those waves and to ride that momentum is one of the most important things that I can kind of communicate to you. For me, everyone asks, like, I have a food truck idea, like, don't steal it, but I'll tell you about it. And so, like, basically food trucks are not subtle things, right? They communicate something in a really simple way, usually with a sense of humor, and they have a very narrow menu. And that's what makes it great for first-time entrepreneurs, right? Because the best food trucks do 2 or 3 things really well, and then they communicate that through visual design, and they also communicate it through everything that they do. But a lot of people wonder, like, and I actually, about a year and a half into it, I was like, are food trucks a fad? Like, people started saying, like, food trucks jumped the shark. And then I started thinking about it, and this truck came out, and a few other trucks came out, and I'm like, that's just awesome. And that has nothing to do with a fad of a particular truck or a particular industry. If you actually look at it, the rest of the world, food truck plays a really important part of people, or street food plays a really important part of people's lives in a kind of casual, non-planned way of going out that's not a restaurant and that's not cooking at home. So I started sort of thinking about it, and I went to this conference where a chef from San Francisco named Murad, who's Moroccan, started talking about Moroccan street food markets. And he said this really great thing that has always stuck with me, which is people in Morocco go to night markets not because they want to eat. They go because all the people that they want to see, they know will be at the night market. And so for me, it really became much more about a sense of community and building a sense of place. And that was really the first pivot away from off the grid as something about food trucks and off the grid much more as a place where it's a community space, where people have connections, and the food is the hook to bringing people into a great experience. So, with that, I'm going to hand this off. This is Jose. So, Jose is going to tell you a little bit about how we
So this is not the end of Matt. We're trying to blend two presentations here because our story is really connected in three different phases with three different projects. So I'm going to do my best to interrupt this presentation and try to talk about this experience about the city. So I'm an urban planner. I came to Cal until I finished in 2011, and after finish. So one of the things that I learned as an urban planner is like during the story of the cities, there been some revolutions. Like this was the first revolution, I would say, like we really impacted the size of the cities, like the train, then the electricity, right? Like the cities that we know wouldn't be that high if we wouldn't have elevators, right? And the electricity changed that. Then the car, the sprawl, and then the IT revolution. So I was finishing my master's degree here of urban planning, and I was saying, okay, there is a lot of IT information there, and nobody's using it for transforming cities, right? So one day I'm walking through North Shattuck, and I crash in one off-the-grid market, right? And I see, okay, this is what's going on here. There is 1,000, 2,000 people, and they're participating, and the only way that they know that there is market here is through Twitter, right? And they're coming every other week. And oh, this is fantastic! Like they're transforming the space. Like it's a street, and right now it's a square. It's a hall. It's a you know the center of the town. So I met Matt, and by then I said, how many locations do you have like this? And he said, okay, I have 5 locations, and I'm closing the location number 6, right? That is in San Mateo. So I asked him, like, do you want some help with data? Like, again, we're here. Like, can we use data? Can we understand what's going on? Where can we put the other locations? Long story short, we start working when you had 5 locations, and right now you have 52. So that's in how many years?
5 years.
5 years. So that's the growing using technology. So that was Hitmap. That was the beginning of Hitmap. So after working a year with Matt, we created this company that is called Hitmap. That is basically a spin-off of what we start doing together, is how we locate these markets in the space, in the cities. So Hitmap was, well, you know Saturday Center, you know Skydeck is a company from Skydeck here, has been receiving a lot of support for different venture capital firms so far. And we came up with this idea, like, okay, these locations, or I would call Matt, has an awesome product. Like, this is fantastic. So how can we help more people that has the same problem, right? Like, you have a small coffee shop and you don't know where to go, right? And you don't understand the city. You don't know where is the right demographic, where is the income that you are looking for, right? So this is basically the value proposition. So we are integrating a lot of data, and we're making predictions for you. So basically, you are moving or you're expanding. You're in the city with less risk. this is the software. I don't want to go into details, but basically with data we can make better decisions. And this is what happened after I would say a year. Like these are the clients that are using right now Hitmap, and you will see that Papa John's right now is using. This is the third biggest bank in the world, and also this is the second primary health company. We have been featured in CNN, and what I'm gonna wrap it up here is, like, before Matt can continue, is kind of Matt was the right vessel for this, I would say, company, for this idea, for how to create a company inside another company and then spin off to an own entity, right? So you can continue from here, like, but I'm going to interrupt again, because there is more projects like this. So yeah.
Just real fast, like, this is the environment that, like, I've kind of been in, just in terms of, like, market size. So it's a market that, remember, Off the Grid started in 2010, so we've just been experiencing this kind of rapid increase in what does it mean to kind of do temporary vending in some sort of capacity. The premise that Off the Grid operates under right now is a kind of interesting one, which is that basically by 2030, 60% of the world's population is going to be located in urban centers. And so what does that mean? What that means is that space becomes more valuable, cities become denser, and that opportunities exist for creating spaces where people have low risk opportunities or low cost of investment into space. So where is space? Well, if you think about it, streets, sidewalks, parks, plazas, outdoor space, places that aren't intended for permanent use but can kind of facilitate temporary use, are huge opportunities as the cities get denser, as the world gets smaller, and as people really lose opportunities for going to try and start a business in a brick and mortar space where they have high cost of entry and long commitments.
Yeah, so I want to say that after that I would call success with Hitmap, like I feel like we raised $500,000 and we found other co-founders that right now are running this business by itself. We start moving to another, or I start moving to in another venture, right? Like and again under the umbrella of Off the Grid, and again using everything that Matt is doing as a vessel for these ideas, for how to make new urbanism or how to activate spaces. So the company is called Activate, but basically what we have been doing is trying to do something that nobody's doing so far, that is getting and measuring everything that is going out of there, like Yelp comments or IoT solutions, and the clients that have been more, attracted by this technology are like a big corporation, big campuses, like corporate campuses that right now, again, if you go to, I don't know, Silicon Valley, like all these big corporations, right, are basically cities, right? Like 60,000 people every day, right? And nobody planned those cities, right? There wasn't an urban planner behind. They're just growing. So right now, you will see a lot of food trucks there. You will see a lot of things. So part of this new opportunity that we created was consulting them and trying to use as much as information that we can collect on social media and see, so they can make better decisions in their environments that they're huge. So that's.
So I think the kind of as Jose was kind of saying, the idea is, well, what are all of these different pain points that we're trying to address getting to this destination, which is ultimately we want to do things that are temporary that feel permanent, right? Like that's the fundamental premise of what Off the Grid has really been trying to do lately. And so the first thing that we kind of moved into was this idea of, okay, people are at our markets, they want to privatize that experience, and they want to use it to throw events. So we started doing catering pretty quickly. And then we started, an interesting thing happened. Google called us, and they had a cafe that was being built, and they needed support for that cafe. An important thing about Off the Grid up to this point was Off the Grid only worked with third-party food businesses. We didn't make any food ourselves. And we worked with Google for about 8 months while they were waiting for this cafe to be built. And at the end of the 8 months, they said, we really love the platform of mobile food trucks, but there's a problem. All of these third-party businesses, we can't control, we have no transparency into the supply chain, we don't know where the food's coming from. We want healthier food than some of the trucks are willing to offer us, and we need more control in a greater scalable kind of sense. So what we're going to do is we want you to help us with concepting food trucks of our own. We're going to do it ourselves with our current corporate food service provider. And I was like, well, would you be open to us giving you a proposal to do it for you rather than going through another corporate food service provider? And they were like, yeah, we'd entertain it. And so we put in this proposal and we started this entity called the Whole Cart, where now, basically in the last 2 years, we run 30 different food trucks every day at Google's campus for them. We feed about 9,000 people every single day. And so now Off the Grid is actually the largest food truck operator in the country, in addition to being the largest food market space operator as well. And we do all the branding, we produce all the food. It's all kind of centralized through us. And so people ask me sometimes, like, do you ever miss the opportunity to make ramen? This is kind of my version of making ramen. So I think people ask, like, for those people who have never had a chance to go to our events, one of the cool things about our events is the unplanned encounters. So if you think about it, you wake up in the morning, maybe you live with somebody, maybe you don't, you go out, you kind of do some planned activities, you go to work, you're in class, whatever, but you'll see as you leave school, you go to work, you spend time with the people that you're with at work, maybe you go out to lunch, maybe you don't, then you come home and you go out with another set group of people, and you can go through your day and actually only meaningfully interact with 15 or 20 people, which is crazy. And so what our spaces allow you to do is go outside and not necessarily go to dinner, but run into neighbors, run into friends, engage in conversations with people in really easy ways that start with maybe like, oh, that looks awesome, where'd you get it, right? Our spaces are great places to meet people if you're single. But one of the things that we started to think about was what are the ways that we can transform our spaces in different ways, again, trying to create things that feel built but are temporary. And we started to look at shipping container construction. In particular, this was when Jose was working directly for Off the Grid, and we started to kind of investigate, well, what if we had shipping containers, we moved them around, and instead of pop-up tents, we had something that were actually kind of buildings, but we could move them from place to place. And thus ensued a 3-year voyage where we learned how to manufacture. And we're still kind of in that process today. But we have patents for this product. It's called Cubert. And what it is an 8-foot by 8-foot by 9-foot tall structure. All the doors open up, and it transforms into a portable event space. We are actually right now in the middle. Did we? Yeah. All right. We are right now in the middle. This was version 1. The last picture was the latest version. But really, what it is kind of fundamentally that idea of a building that moves around.
Yeah, like part of the interest, and I also has been involved in this project in the organization, and I think like the cool thing is like you definitely can transform and make a whole change in the whole industry of temporary events. So you can put, I don't know, 10 of them in Coachella and you can make Coachella, right? Or like, seriously, like we're not at that level yet, but what we're looking is like how can we transform? And also attaching this with our goal and my expectations is this can be also a vessel of data, right? So there is a lot of IoT that we're thinking and how can we use this container as a collector of all that information. So again, my journey here under Matt organization, so there is my journey, of course, that I cannot undermine. Matt is 40 under 40, according with San Francisco Financial, the newspaper. Like, so I'm you know, like I'm so small, yeah, near to him. But what I'm saying is like I've been. We have been able to connect together, and also his company has been a vessel for my interests, right? That are related with the data, with the urban planning, and has been a great journey so far.
So the last part of this is really about food trucks and kind of saying it's an old technology. And so this is kind of where we bring it all together. This product hasn't changed since 1960, basically. It is really challenged in a few ways. If you think about it, most people who want to get into the food truck business, they want to get in the business to cook. They don't want to get in the business to be an auto mechanic. They don't want to be in the business to maintain generators. And they certainly don't want to be in the business to fight for parking spaces. You're paying all this money for a truck and a vehicle, but it's actually separate from the point of what people get into the business to do, which is to cook. And so that's where the idea of, well, maybe these things could be different. Maybe these things, Q-Berts, could be more. And so this is the first iteration of what we did for a counter space. So we're building all of these modular shelves so people can turn them into retail kiosks or band stages. And later this year, we'll be doing our first food service kiosk. So the idea being that people can just show up and cook as opposed to having to worry about the truck component of what they do. So this is the end of our chat. I think we kept it to 40 minutes, which first time doing this is good. We can probably talk for 4 hours if you wanted us to. But if you guys have questions, we're happy to answer it.
So you said like the food truck business is expanding. Do you think that regulations are getting more strict or less strict as like there's more food trucks?
So it's a good question. I think fundamentally regulations are beginning to emerge, where before no regulations existed at all, or it was very opaque. So some jurisdictions are quite hard. Other jurisdictions are much more flexible and open. I think though, like fundamentally, what's that kind of tension that existed between restaurants and food trucks is beginning to blend together because a lot of restaurateurs are opening food trucks because catering is an important part of their business. And also the natural progression for a food truck to expand is to go into a restaurant space. And so people are thinking of it as a much more fluid kind of experience. Berkeley, though, is one of those places with very restrictive food truck permitting laws. So you should all write your local politicians.
So I mean, it seems like there's a lot of different, like, you've basically exhausted like every different opportunity for innovation within the space, or you keep seeming to like push for new areas of innovation, how do you draw that balance of like, okay, this is an awesome new opportunity, versus, okay, this might take away from my core business and it might deplete my resources and my attention and might actually be detrimental?
Yep. So it's a really excellent question. What you're going to be presented with as an entrepreneur often are kind of limitless possibilities, right? And so for us, we aggressively pursue opportunities and aggressively stop investing in things when we kind of realize that they're out of the scope of the vision and the values of the organization. For us, it took me a long time to kind of understand, well, what's the point of a mission and what's the point of the values of an organization? It is to kind of guide your decision-making process about the things that are worthwhile to invest in or not. The other thing is obviously resources. And so as the company has gotten larger, there are more opportunities for pursuing things because there's more resources. But like our strategy is a different kind of strategy because we're a platform business now. And so what we're doing is looking at all the inputs and outputs of that system, and that's a different kind of proposition than running one product kind of business. But it really is driven by a kind of company values and mission statement, and we've had to revise ours 2 or 3 times in order to represent what we are as a company now, and have evolved to over time. I don't know if you have input for that.
Well, I think that everything is changing, right? Like, I would say that it's difficult to define the company. Like, how can you define Off the Grid? I would say that it's not a food truck company. It's a food experience, right? But started as a food truck company, right? I feel like, and I think that this area is special for things like that, right? Like, what is Facebook? It's not anymore a social media. It's kind of a browser, right? So how can you go fast? How can you react to the changes? And how can you take the opportunities and do something great, right? It's my
How do you decide on, I'm assuming there's a limited space, so how do you decide on what food trucks to offer a space to? And then I'm sure that everybody in San Francisco wants to be there, at every food truck, I mean. So how do you decide who to allow in? Does that vary?
Well, so this gets, it's interesting hearing Jose talk about our meeting because when I first met Jose, it was he was this Chilean guy who was like really stoked about our space. And he caught me at a really interesting time, which was, I was thinking, all the places, we were in 6 locations, all the places where we located, I knew them. I could picture them in my mind, right? If somebody says, I want to put a food truck a block and a half away from your house in any given direction, you're like, okay, I can picture that, right? But what about going to San Jose? Or what about, in theory, going to Los Angeles or New York? It becomes really hard to do that, and so it was that sense of predictability that we were kind of searching for through data, and so the answer to your question is increasingly we're using data to drive the decision-making process around what we do. And eventually, really what we're trying to do is have just an element, to have the data drive everything so we're free to just curate. And that's really what we're driving toward. For people who are familiar with our markets, every 6 months we rotate out the bottom 25% of people. The goal is to have that rotation and that cycle happen basically continuously rather than every 6 months. So it'll go to 3 months, and it'll go to every 15 days. But really it'll be about trying to optimize the spaces to make it as appealing as we can to customers. So that's really what we're going for.
Thank you for the presentation. I really liked how I really enjoyed the outflow of ideas that came from just this one off-the-grid original idea. So given that, I was just wondering, because you have so many ideas, and I'm sure you have so many in the pipeline, at what point do you know that you have the right resources to make this product the best that it could be, or whether you're not the right people to make this kind of product?
Again, I think it goes back for me to the values kind of proposition. And I think, the way that we look at all of our product areas is they each facilitate each other. And so at a point where we're blocked because of the capacities in one area, say we built a SaaS platform. Why do we do that? Because it's not really practical to manage all the documentation for all of the trucks with humans doing it, right? And so we get involved in software development. And then you have a skill set that you theoretically become okay at, right? And so you're like, well, we can build other software products too. And so you start kind of going down that process, right? So I think it's sort of confined within the values of the organization, but each of these things hopefully increases the value and increases the effectiveness and increases the financial stability of the company overall.
Can you tell me about? Thank you so much for coming today. It was really interesting to hear like the rawness of your story and like your transition from one venture to another. I'm really curious about the data piece. Data's like the massive amount of data is sometimes hard to quantify. So I was wondering like if you could talk a little bit more about like where you got your data from, how you filtered your data, that process.
So initially, like, well, that's Hitmap. So right now, I would say Off the Grid is a client of Hitmap, right? So it's a spin-off, but this is still. And what I can say from Hitmap side is like we are buying data, we are creating our own data, and there is public data that is available. So when you put all this together, right now you can reach 5,000 variables, right? But it's not about the amount of data, it's about the quality of the data. So right now Hitmap is in the process of machine learning, you know, like we have been for a while in doing machine learning, but trying to define what are those variables that create more impact in the output that you are looking for, right? If there is sales, if there is, you know, whatever, efficiency, you know, so linear regressions that became in machine learning, and that can create sophisticated algorithms that process all the data, right? But again, it's not about, the data is there, so you can go to the census website and download all the data, but it's not about the amount, it's about how you process, how you analyze that data, and you relate with an outcome, right? So I don't know if that answered the question. Like for example, like one of the things that we realized at the very beginning, right, in off-the-grid markets, that the target for the people at off-the-grid markets was between 20, how we call it? Like it was between 25 and 40, right? Like that's the people that was going, like families with one kid, you know, young families, or people, you know, finishing school. Like that was the target. It wasn't younger people or older people, right? Like that was the initial. So originally we tried to focus on that thing in order to get more impact. Like again, that was the very beginning, right? Off-the-Grid right now has a lot of different markets to different publics and segments. So.
I would say like Jose's point about there's tons of data, but you know, the signal versus the noise matters. I would also say like you can deliver people the right piece of information, but if it's not presented in a way that's consumable, like we deal with this all the time, and we're actually building kind of business intelligence tools for the trucks, but doing it in super clear, super simplified ways, so that it makes it really crystal clear, okay, this is the decision you should make. And so it's that combination of like having quality data and then processing it and representing it in a way that really communicates the intention of what the data is there to serve.
I think we're out of time, but thank you so much. If you have any additional questions, feel free to stick around for a few minutes.